Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Tmeister and welcome back to Timbukton. In this episode, guys, we will be building Kings Canyon Park. So this is the entire zone we're going to be working on today, so it's a fairly large episode, but a good portion of this episode isn't actually on the park itself. So there was a lot of preparation to go into this project, and much of that preparation was developing some residential zones around the park. So I didn't want the park to have like these sharp borders where, you know, all of a sudden, boom, you're in the park. I kind of wanted the park to intertwine in the city and kind of like, I don't know, just flow its way through this canyon here because the terrain is quite jagged. It would have been kind of hard to build like a proper organized park. It's going to have a much more organic feel. And I mean, with the size of this park, it's not really like a city park. It's more of like a nature park that you would typically find in like outside of the city, for example. So anyways, this is what the entire thing looks like after I built up the area around the park. So I basically just added a whole bunch of houses. I created a nice transition point between the Timbukton Peninsula where you would find like a lot more older houses compared to the other side of the park where, you know, you start to get into your more modern homes. But I mean, here is a great example of the layout of the park. As you can see, it kind of intertwines between these neighborhoods here. It kind of follows the shape of the canyon. So yeah, I mean, I think it looks really cool and it leaves us a ton of room to build. And you'll see here, I'm gonna raise all of the trees out of the park. And that'll give you a good glimpse on how just jagged and what kind of terrain we have to deal with here. So for this park, I decided to go with two entrances. This is entrance number 1, I suppose. We'll get into entrance number 2 a little later in this episode. Nothing very fancy here. It's just going to be a basic parking lot. And I'm going to add some details a little bit later on. But anyways, like, the focus of this is more on the park itself. And I did go quite detail heavy in this park compared to what I normally do, especially when we get into like fauna, like bushes and trees and all those kind of things. I kind of really pushed my envelope in this episode, but it was a ton of fun. Like, this is one of the types of detailings that I really enjoy, and I think I excel a little bit more in. What I'm talking about is like this kind of detailing with trees and things like that, rather than, I don't know, like urban developments. Like, what I mean by that is more like, you know, dumpsters and whatever you would find behind buildings and on, you know, plazas and those kind of things. I don't know, I guess I'm more of like a nature-oriented person. But you can't really blame me. I'm from a small town. You know, there's not much to do here except go for walks in the woods and do nature-y things, right? So if I was in downtown Toronto all my life, maybe that would be different. Now, the next step in this build is doing a little bit of terraforming. And for this, I had like a little bit of a creativity spark. And like, I figured that this canyon would not be a canyon without a stream running through it, and also a nice little lake, or a pond, or I guess, yeah, it would be like a natural lake, I suppose. But yeah, this is what I'm building right here. I kind of had a little bit of trouble because I didn't know that the water tool, or whatever you want to call this, was set to 0 capacity, so there was just no water spawning and I couldn't figure it out. So after like 30 minutes of screwing around with that, I kind of gave up on it and went to work on the stream. Oh, actually, no, I did figure it out, but anyway, yeah, so here I am working on the stream, and this is really cool, guys. You have to check this asset out. But it's a network mod or asset. I'm not even sure how you would consider it, but it is a network. So it's a stream network that's made by Tsardis, and yeah, I mean, it actually looks really great. It doesn't blend in 100% with the surroundings. Like, it's not the same color of the water that I chose for Timbukton, but it's close enough to where it wasn't a big deal to to kind of blend it in with some bushes and trees, and you'll see, like, as this episode progresses, you can't even tell that this is not really matching up. I think I did a fairly good job at blending everything together. But, this stream is an integral part of this park. You'll see a little bit later on what I get into, and this is like one of the coolest things that I think I've built. And yeah, I'm just like super happy with how this turns out at the end. So stay tuned for that, guys. So in this build, I'm gonna go a little bit back and forth between the stream and the path layout. So right now I'm working on some paths. I'm trying to get the main scheme of the park underway. But with the stream in place and being not 100% sure how everything's gonna pan out, as you can see, like, I'm struggling a little bit with the terrain here just because of the way it's interacting with the stream. Obviously streams don't go uphill, right? So I had to terraform the area in a way that the stream made sense. And of course, when you place a path next to the stream, it kind of screws up the terrain. So that's why in this episode, I'm going to be bouncing a lot around in this part, going from laying down some streams to laying down some more paths. But for the moment, this is the main layout of the paths. I'm going to add more onto that as we go along. And here, guys, this is the first time ever that I am using these rocks here by Gray Flame. I've seen a ton of other YouTubers use them, and I think that they just accent these areas quite well when you're dealing with these kind of nature areas and dealing with terrain. It's a super easy and effective way to spruce up your natural looking areas. The green texture that's on top of the rocks doesn't match up 100% with the surroundings, but this, once again, guys, I blend in quite well by using a whole bunch of trees and different methods to get them to look like they belong in this area. I'm going to use a mixture of these green rocks and these grayish brown rocks just to give these areas a nice accent. And of course, like, with this being a canyon, this whole area would have been carved out from years and years and years of erosion from these little streams. I was saying that Timbukton was probably once an island. Just by looking at the terrain, it's not hard to imagine that it must have been an island at some point. We could even say that the canyon was carved out by a river that once flowed through here, and then it built up with a whole bunch of sediment, and that's why Timbukton is now a peninsula. But I mean, these rocks just add so much life. I'm going to add a lot of these rocks by Gray Flame and a series of other rocks. A lot of like pebbles and broken off rocks. I want to make the area look super jagged and rough. But you might be thinking that this totally stands out from the rest of the terrain, like it doesn't match up. But just wait until I place down some trees and stuff, guys. You'll see that it all blends in quite nicely. And I think it's a really nice addition to the whole city. So right here, guys, what I'm doing is I'm creating a little kind of spur off the main trail that connects to a surrounding neighborhood. So that's the kind of layout I wanted for this park. I didn't want to have a set entrance. There's no fees or anything being collected from this park. It's just a public park, accessible to anybody. So along the main path going right through the whole canyon, I decided to make like these little spurs and these little trails that connect up surrounding neighborhoods to the central main path. And my thought process behind that is I'm assuming that a lot of these paths are going to be used by commuters going to work. So, just imagine somebody who lives on Timbukton Peninsula but works on the Timbukton Mall. So, rather than driving from one end to the other, you can just walk through the park, nice and refreshing. I've laid out the paths in a semi-efficient way, but yeah, I mean, that's another little quirk that I've decided to do in this park. And this, guys, what I'm starting right here, this is the most exciting part of the park. This is like the staple of the entire area. I'm actually really, really, really impressed by, you'll see in a little bit what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, what I'm basically doing right now is I'm making a little lagoon area, and there's going to be a nice waterfall here. So of course, every stream, every river has a source. Unfortunately, Timbukton is built up enough now where I can't just start putting streams and rivers and everything where I want. So I kind of made this monolith here, just a big pile of rocks, and I'm just going to have the water just kind of coming out of it. So it's going to look like a water source on steroids, basically. But yeah, I just think this whole setup here is so cool. And I'm going to develop the whole area around it too. I'm going to make a nice little walkway that comes up to the lagoon so people can come and view it. So stay tuned till that, guys. This is all included in this super awesome episode of the Timbukton series. This was really time consuming too, guys. Like, all the terraforming and all the rock placing that went on in this episode. A lot of it I did off camera too, because it would have made the episode a little too long. But, you know, it was all worth it. All in all, I think I probably invested like 10 hours or so in this episode alone, just building and trying out different things. Because a lot of what I'm doing right now is I've never done before, right? I've never played around with these streams or these rocks. I've never done any like natural builds like this. I think I'm overdue for this kind of stuff, honestly, because a lot of YouTubers are doing these kind of builds, and you know, Timbukton's a perfect location for this kind of stuff, with it being in such a natural area. You know, it's not like a city in the Midwest where you just have farms and urban development all over the place. Timbukton's kind of nestled in its own forest. So yeah. Oh, and here, this is kind of a cool thing I thought of. I don't know how this popped into my mind, but it just kind of did at the right moment. So in the base game, you have like these smoke or steam props. You can just place them down where you want. I think there's 3 kinds of each, and that they each like produce steam or smoke in a certain way. So I placed one down here, and it just looks so perfect. It's a nice like steam. I mean, it looks exactly like the waterfall is producing a whole bunch of mist. And right below here, you'll see in just a minute, I didn't have a way of making this stream go downhill very smoothly. So I'm making this nice little crevice here, and I'm just gonna place more of these steam props, and it'll be as if these are rapids. And you know, as you can see, it's quite narrow, so the water pressure would be super high. You know, I just think that this whole area ended up super awesome. And this is what I was talking about, that little path there that's going to go to the waterfall. So you can just walk up here and view it. Nothing too complicated here. I'm hoping citizens are going to use this path. This is like one of my favorite places in the city at this point. So aside from just paths and a bunch of rocks, this park is going to have so much more to offer. The ParkLife DLC is honestly my favorite DLC that's been released so far. It just includes so much. I feel like it includes a bit more than any other DLC, honestly. Like mechanics aside and all that, this DLC has so much to offer. And a lot of what I'm using here are part of the nature park, such as this lookout tower right here. And I'm going to use a couple of more props that are included in that DLC. But just take like these paths, for example. Like they're just so well textured and detailed, like you would think that this is honestly something made on the workshop. Like, I don't know, I feel like Paradox hit the nail on the head with this DLC, and it's the DLC that I had the most fun with. And I don't know, it just works for me. So I'm going to be placing a little bit of these props down in the park all over. I'm going to be placing down a main gate, and I think I'd place down a secondary gate as well on the other end of the park. In just a moment, I'm also going to build a nice fishing lake in the center part of the park. And after that, the rest of this episode is going to be totally focused on detailing, and you'll see, like, even for my standards, I went a little bit more heavy than I normally do in terms of details. But like I was saying at the start of this episode, most of it's going to be fauna, shrubs and whatever you would find in a nature park. And what was really fun is I envisioned this area being kind of in a swamp. It's a naturally formed canyon over years and years of erosion and sediment and whatever else. So I just felt like it would be appropriate for a lot of this park to be kind of swampy. So like cattails everywhere, like long grass. So yeah, that's what we're jumping into right now. And a lot of the fauna that's in this park is going to be just this. Another thing I really like about this park is when you're walking through it at street level and like a first person point of view, you really don't feel like you're in a city at all, just because of the terrain. Like you're down in a canyon, right? So you don't see any of the downtown buildings. You don't even see any houses really. And that's one thing I really like, because when you're walking through a city nature park like this, the whole point of going into this park is kind of to get away from the city life and all the hustle and bustle. And I think this park really offers a nice calm environment. And I'm assuming, like, if this was in a real life kind of setting, it would probably buffer out a lot of the sounds coming from the city as well. With it being like in a canyon bowl, basically, I feel like it would reflect or at least like absorb a lot of the sounds coming from the city. So all in all, I think the citizens of Timbukton should quite enjoy the Kings Canyon Park. And for those of you who are wondering, this is not based on anything in real life, actually. It's like one of the only creations I've made in Timbukton so far that's not either based on Halifax or somewhere in Maine or whatever the case is. This is totally unique, and it's probably the type of thing where you wouldn't find in a lot of places. All in all, I enjoyed building this so much. So moving on, guys, we are now in the final part of this episode, which is just loading up the entire park with trees. Nothing too complicated here. I am again using the tree brush as you've seen me use in the past. I have a bunch of collections of trees for each series that I'm working on right now. Of course, I have one for Timbukton. It is quite general. It's mostly optimized for building forest really fast. So it just has like, I don't know, maybe 10 different kinds of trees in it. But in this park, I really had to be specific and plop a lot of fauna down manually, because obviously it's just not included in my Timbukton brush. And there's no reason to have a lot of these trees and tall grass and whatever the case is in that brush. So along the river and along a lot of the paths, I go into a little bit sharper detail. And on top of these rocks too. And the challenge with these rocks, I'll try to explain very quickly, is that trees won't actually clip to them. So they'll kind of, like if I was to plop a tree on top of a big rock, the tree would end up like halfway in the rock. So I had to make sure to use like either really big trees or tall trees, so at least a good portion of them were sticking up through the rock. And yeah, it kind of was a little bit of a challenge, but these rocks look so good with that green texture on top that a lot of them I just chose to leave bare because they just add a nice texture to the whole park. But for the most part, the park is complete. However, I am going to extend this creek a little further until the Bay of Timbukton, and we're going to interact with it a little later on in one of the future episodes. But I mean, yeah, this creek asset mod, whatever you want to call it, is really great. I highly suggest you check it out if you're building a park similar to this one in your city. So that is pretty much going to be all for today, guys. Like I said, I'm just going to finalize a few little details here and there. Stay tuned because I have a load of awesome cinematics coming up. But before that, I'm pleased to announce we have another patron. Mr. Lucky Panda has joined the Patreon team, and let's go over his assigned house and business location in Timbukton. Alright, so Lucky Panda has just moved into the city of Timbukton in his multi-million-dollar luxury mansion overlooking the beautiful Kings Canyon Park. As you can see, he has a helicopter parked on his roof. He has a beautiful backyard featuring a full-size tennis court, a pool, and plenty of space. Now let's move on to his business location. Lucky Panda is the current CEO of LP Banking and Investments, a multi-billion-dollar company right in the heart of downtown Timbukton. So welcome Lucky Panda to the city of Timbukton. Now that's all for today, guys. Until the next episode, please take care and enjoy the cinematics.